I am so excited today. I'm here with Gretchen D. Knicker. Gretchen is a founder and career coach at Unbound and Unbothered with a big history of working in tech, in sales, in different roles. Gretchen, welcome. It's so great to have you here today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Lori.
Yes. And we met because I saw you championing women on LinkedIn for a number of years, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But first, tell us a little bit about your background because you've been in sales and marketing and operations with some top tech companies and SaaStr. And I'm just curious, what was your plan when you first got your bachelor's degree? And how did things veil themselves over the course of your career?
Yeah. When I was getting my bachelor's degree, the plan was to go to law school. And then by the end of school, I was like, oh, and I ended up having two bachelor's degrees because I had so many theater credits that they made it really easy for me to get a second degree. And I just had to finish a minor.
Okay, so let's stop for a moment. That you got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice
and one in theater
and
with a
theater.
minor in Spanish. Yeah. So obviously I was headed for tech, right? Obviously.
That's so funny.
The path was really clear. Yeah. But then I'd grown up really poor. I put myself through school. So I really didn't understand like how to parlay that into a career. And once I wasn't going to go to law school, then I didn't know what to do. So I moved to San Francisco as a very educated waitress for 2 years. And then I
waitressed.
Yeah.
There.
And I started temping, and my job requirement was I don't want to wear a name tag and I don't want anyone to call me Miss. But other than that, it was like, I'm open. And probably like the third or fourth company that I went and was working at through the temp agency was this ridiculous. It was 17 people in a 4-bedroom flat in the Marina District of San Francisco. And it was a startup. And I remember we still used phones then, 1998. And I went to call my friend on the payphone at lunch and was like, this isn't even a real company. Yeah. But they gave me more and more responsibility. And it just felt like a place. And I think tech in general really felt like a place that it was just an island of misfits. Like anyone who just like really didn't find themselves like clearly in whatever, like I wish industry was still had the good parts of that left. But
yeah. Did that company make it through 2000, 2001 or?
It was horrible. Yeah. So 2000, we had a massive layoff. Like we laid off like 135 people with 2 hours of notice. It was really horrific. I ended up with like an ulcer, but then we had some angel funding that got us through. And I worked there until 2004. And it was a bit like the way that it is right now reminds me of how it was then.
Yeah.
Right. Where like a whole bunch of people have been laid off and you have that survivor's guilt. You have there are no other jobs. So I have to make this one work. I see a lot of those parallels right now. I don't know that there's opportunities. And I stayed there till 2004. And then I decided to go get my MBA at Berkeley. And so I left, but I learned so much in those years. I felt like I got like a 20-year education in like the highs and lows of a business. Right.
And then what were you thinking when you got your MBA? What was the plan?
I wanted to figure out where I wanted to specialize, right? What am I interested in? Like I'd given up things at the other company as we hired more people, but I didn't really know what I liked. And the only thing that I held on to was HR because I felt some really horrible decisions were going to be made and people were going to whatever, but I didn't want to stay in HR. I didn't want to go be in HR in another company. In business school, I loved marketing. I loved sales. And that was like super interesting to me. And so I focused in on that there. But mostly I just wanted the pedigree, if I'm being honest, which I can be like 15 years later or whatever.
Yeah.
I really just I'd worked so hard. My parents were in high school when they had me. Wow. I grew up like I like to say government cheese poor because people have like different varying degrees of poverty, but like very poor. I paid for 100% of my undergrad. I lived on my own, like all of that. And so I just wanted something that like having 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Nevada, Reno, which usually gets the response, I didn't know there was a university.
Oh, I know.
I thought there was just
because of my friend Alice Hyman.
Yeah. So I just wanted something that like I felt like it represented how hard I'd work. And so that was really, I think for me, if I think about my biggest thing that I got is I got to finally believe that other people could see my value, even if I understanding now that I had no control over whether they saw my value.
But it was a big deal back then. I remember
Yeah.
hiring salespeople back then. Then you dabbled in sales and marketing and operations. And
Yeah.
what were you always the only woman in the room back then?
Certainly, they're often the only woman in the room, maybe one other. Certainly, when I joined EchoSign, we were very small, but there was only one other woman and she was the office admin. And that obviously changed over time. But like the bathrooms were both male bathrooms, and then there was just one. And
I had those too.
I went to the point of because the boys used ours as their like sitting bathroom, which I really didn't appreciate. So I put like a big pink basket of tampons, and like I was trying to make it like so incredibly unfriendly, but it really didn't change. Or like they would bring in magazines and then I would run them underwater and put them in the garbage can. Like I was really trying to deter that particular use case for the restroom, but I
remember those startup days. Yeah. One of the things that you said that caught my attention on your LinkedIn is that 56% of women leave tech by mid-career.
Yeah.
Foregoing comfortable salaries and removing their expertise and mentorship from the workplace, often starting over in new industries or leaving the formal workforce altogether. And I'm seeing that too. And let's talk about that a little bit. I definitely have my opinions. What are your thoughts? What have you seen?
The other part of that stat is 50% leave by the age of 35.
Wow.
So now think about that. If 50% leave by the age of 35, by 40, then you get ageism seeping in, right? So like what we get 5 years where we like survived whatever before, and then the last 6% leave at over the age of 35, right? To that 56%. And I think there's a number of things. Like obviously some people just get into tech and they're like, oh, this isn't for me. I could be like, I just really wanted to be an actor all along. And so I want to go do that or whatever it is. But I think there's a lot that are like me who just push and push. And you get to a point where you feel like your only choice is to either burn out or burn it all down. And that's like when a lot of my clients, that's what they feel like their choices are. Like I feel like the only way that I can choose me is to not choose my career. And there's already so few women, and we're getting particularly like if someone was in a director or VP level where they have at least a seat at the table, then no, the people that are coming behind don't get to see her there anymore. And that's the part that really, if I think about my larger mission as founding Unbound and Unbothered, it's that larger mission of the ones that want to stay, let me show you how you can, right?
Yeah. I think that's a good attitude because I was feeling disappointed every time I heard about a woman leaving tech, leaving SaaS, leaving sales, and they're just saying, I'm done. I don't want to be in this boys club where nobody's listening to me. I was passed over for a promotion. I mean, you can pick any one of a number of phrases, but we hear them all, right? I found out my male peer that I do more work than he does I have a better background, and I found out I was making 30% less in 2024. This is still happening with salaries, not the commission structure. Is what I don't understand why this is something that leadership can solve for if they were more mindful and more thoughtful. And if you're a leader listening to this and the women on your teams don't know where they stand in relation to the men, just being open and having a policy about pay and incentives could be huge. The other thing would be maternity benefits. And I don't mean just family benefits in general, but I think that women that give birth have different needs than just family leave. There are issues, particularly when you're in sales, about how you leave with accounts. And when you come back and if you start at zero, it's very deflating to have a new baby at home and you're at zero because somebody closed your deals while you were gone, and you may or may not have gotten some credit for that. That's a real issue.
Yeah. And it makes total sense that you would like, all the time, particularly when you're a new parent, like all the time that you're spending at work is time away from your child.
Yeah.
Right? And if that's not worthwhile, like
Yeah.
it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can be here with you douchebags all day. Right. Like getting interrupted and like having accounts taken away and like some BS that's going on. Or I can be home with my child. Like we need to make it harder.
Yeah.
Right. For women to, because that's just an easy decision, right? If it's financially feasible, that's a really easy decision. And I think that's what, certainly when I was earlier in my career, I just always thought, what do they mean they want to spend more time with family? And now I'm like, oh, it was code for like, enough of this. I'm not going to tell you that you all suck, but you are not making it worth my while to be here.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the part I don't think I understood when I was younger.
Yeah, it should be a tough choice for sure. I already had my child. And so I didn't go through that, but I've heard so many stories in recent years and months, and also women being fired when they were pregnant.
I've seen that a lot, and a lot of layoffs when they're pregnant too right now.
Yeah. And just unbelievable stuff that happens. Also have seen what I would call bad behavior, where the direct supervisor, the sales manager is, hey, Gretchen, this is the way it is. If you don't like it, too bad. And it didn't feel that way a few years back. It was more like, hey, you have something to share. We want to hear it. Now it's more like survival mode in some companies. They've done some layoffs, like you were saying. And it's, hey, just this is it. So we don't need any more ideas. Just do your job. And if you don't like it, that's cool.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing, particularly when the data shakes out, I think that all of the performative hiring, all of the performative DEI lead hires, where you hire one person for the gram, essentially for the website, and then you give them no resources and no budget and no headcount. And then you're like, I don't understand, because it's all performative.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing now. And we'll see like the sort of the post 17 reaction and the post 22 or post 2020 reaction, and how that people wanted to come in and perform, but hearts and minds weren't changed. And so I think we're still going to see that exact, like when the data shakes out, we're going to see that that women and people in marginalized identities were impacted by these layoffs in an outsized way.
Yeah, totally agree. So what are your suggestions? It's like taking a spoon to the ocean, right? And pulling it out. It's like, where do we start?
Yeah. Yeah. For years, I was a female founder of a B2B enterprise software company, right? That was like less than 3% of founders of B2B software were women way back in, I don't know, whenever this was, 2012.
Yeah.
And so I started, it was just like, oh, a woman, whatever. And I started getting, it was like every time a female founder, oh, we only know one and her name is Gretchen, so you should go talk to her. But that was great for building a network. And then really tried to build gender parity on stage, which they're still doing that. And say that a tech conference can't do that is absolute BS.
Right.
It's not that hard. You just have a policy. There will be no manels.
Yeah, it's a policy. And male leaders, who we have a lot of men that listen to this podcast, you're always welcome to do what I do it a little differently, but men are always welcome to say, I'll be on that panel as long as I know that it's diverse and that other people's voices are, do you have any, I don't see any women. I don't like to accuse people, but I like to say, I didn't see too many women, or and get some clarification. For me now, I'll defer to someone else, and it might be a woman of color. It might be a woman who is up and coming, because I don't need that visibility. So I try to defer as much as I can. I'm not on that many panels anymore.
Yeah. And for the men who are listening, not only coming back and asking if it's diverse, but being like, have you thought of so? And right, this is the thing that I can't speak to what happens with SaaStr now, but early on, sometimes we would put it back to the other, say if it's 3 people and there are 2 men that are already booked, and we're like, you have to go find the other woman or we'll cancel your And I watched Jason do this, and I've never been like more kind of proud in that moment of watching him, because he's risking relationship, right?
Yeah.
And it was so important to him. And I think that was
And if you have,
to him.
if you have sponsors that are in any kind of speaking roles, which most conferences do, it's so easy as a leader to say, this is who our sponsor picked. And for years, I saw that happening. And then it was women like Jill Conrath and Trish Bertuzzi that would speak up and say, that's crazy. They're women that work at that company, or that they could sponsor in to speak on stage, that have big profiles. And that's how some of it changed. But it was real easy to say, we can't do anything because it's the sponsors.
Yeah. Back to your original question, right? Thinking about what do we do? So for a while, after I left SaaStr, I started running an organization for women in tech called Girl Geek, and they do events in the Bay Area at companies. And they also have a couple of virtual conferences each year. And there I was able to really see, what goes on in bigger companies, like what women need there. But ultimately, where it all came together for me was, and like what I want to do, what I'm trying to do to change this is what I do with my coaching now, which is there is so much of it that we are in control of. Like COVID hit and I decided to go back into an early stage startup, and that was a horrible decision. And I really just wanted to make it a year, and I really didn't feel like I could. And that's when I finally invested in a coach. And what I learned, I realized like about shifting my mindset about how much more of this whole situation that I was in control of, how much worse I made it on myself by telling myself, you should have done this, you could have done that. And just really, or deciding they're going to think this, so you shouldn't try that. And all of those things that we are in control of. We don't have to tell ourselves those sorts of things. And so for me, my mission to show up for women has changed over the years. But right now, I feel like I really want to help women turn down the volume on all this stuff that's creating doubt and perfectionism and people pleasing and negative self-talk and all of the things that are going in there, so that we have the energy to go back. We have the energy to go in and be like, Chad, it's your turn to take the notes.
Yeah.
Like,
that's so great.
Kyle, I think I was speaking.
I was speaking. Yeah.
Yeah. If we are not so caught up in our heads and our energy isn't drained by like the stuff that's going on in our own minds, then we have the energy. The ones who want to, like, obviously not a requirement, but the ones who want to go in and they want to start making change. Like, to me, this is the power that we have now. And I just wanted to create an army of strong minded, like badass women to come in and topple everything, right? If I think about my big vision of what I want to happen, like that's where I want to go.
I was on a call with a woman, introductory call this morning, who had found me online. And in a short time talking with her, I realized that she had that perfectionism thing, which luckily I never had. And you can look for me online. You'll see all sorts of incomplete things and social media that's not perfect and all sorts of things. I do not have that. But people will say, on the other hand, they'll say, you're everywhere. You're doing this, you're doing that. I have visibility out there, and it's not perfect, and you don't have to be perfect. So anybody listening that thinks they do, what I told this woman is that, and I believe that she needs to talk with an executive coach, because what she's doing is focusing on the things she's comfortable doing and spending lots and lots of time doing that. But she's in a leadership position, and she happens to be in a family-run business that I would imagine she could ultimately run one day. And she's got to find a way to understand. And I'm not, like I said, I don't coach people on perfectionism like you do, but I would say what I've learned is that you need to work on higher value things, and you have to trust, and you have to fail sometime, because failing is okay. If you make a mistake, it's going to happen. I've done it 100 times in my career.
Yeah. I think what gets us in perfectionism is there's this thing of and it might be unique to the type of clients that come to me, but they come to me with I'm not enough. I'm doing it wrong. I'm afraid of this or that. But what we're really afraid of, and this is the key to really working through perfectionism, is we're afraid of how we're going to feel if something doesn't go the way we think it is. We're afraid of shame. We're afraid of humiliation. But so much of that shame and humiliation is actually created with the stuff that we tell ourselves. You should have done that. Could have done this better. If only you would have, whatever, right? That's what creates the shame and humiliation, the actual physiological response, the initial like pain of it, right? Of, oh man, I really screwed that up. That lasts 60 to 90 seconds. And I think that's your experience, right? You're like, oh, yeah. That was a little embarrassing, but then you move on, right? Because your brain isn't going, you should have done this, you would have done that, right? And so what we're afraid of, if we don't get it, is ourselves. So what we can do, right, doing thought work and mindset work is have our own backs, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
If you agree with yourself to have your own back and build that muscle, then there's nothing you can't go try, because it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's going to be 60 to 90 seconds. And that might happen a few times, right? If you made a really big mistake, each time you think about it, it might come back. But if you don't start shoulding, coulding, and woulding and piling onto it, right, then you're free and you can feel like a superhero. And then you don't have to stay small, like the person that you were just describing, right? You can go try new things, not just something that's, oh, this will be 10% harder than the thing I was doing, so I think I can be successful at it. If you're looking inward for the answer of, am I capable? Am I valuable? Am I worthy? If you're looking inward and you have your own back, then it's all this self-contained unit. And then you're free to go do whatever you want.
And as you get older, you realize, this is what I've realized, is that what I did 5 years ago doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't, if I spent 2 hours making something better than just going, you know what, it looks good enough, it doesn't matter. What matters is a lot of other things, higher value things that, what have I achieved? What's my legacy? What am I working towards? What can I leave behind for other people? That's what's really important. So I promise people that are, first of all, get a coach like Gretchen and work through that, because I've always had a hard time relating to perfectionism. I do get it. And there have been situations where I've worked with like Harvard MBA students or something, and I was more concerned about how I showed up and what I did and how I followed up. But ultimately, it's just, people don't care. People don't really care.
Right. I mean, people are not thinking about us fractionally as much as when we're giving. And oftentimes when we're worried about what they will think, it's usually one or two people in our head. And one of the things I love to walk my clients through is, picture you're like standing in the front of an auditorium and you're giving a talk and you're giving these people a front row seat. I just want you to visualize walking them to the back or walking them out of the room. And then how do you show up? What kind of talk do you give when you're not like speaking to this audience of one or two people, right? When we're worried about what will they think, what will they say, what will they do? It's often that. And like just that idea of, oh, I could have security be like, excuse me, this is your seat, right? Like you can just really play with that whole idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea that what people will say to themselves is so much worse than what you would dare say to another person.
I would lay hands on like my inner critic. Like she would not be physically safe. Like I would just like I'm gonna take off my earrings and my shoes. I'm gonna beat your butt. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't talk to yourself that way.
Yeah.
Cheer yourself on. Like I love that your comment about that, about you have to have your own back. And once you have your own back, anything's possible.
Yeah.
You know, I love that. I posted that on LinkedIn the other day. It was a quote from Muhammad Ali that impossible is an opinion. It's not a fact.
I love that.
Yeah. And his quote, it's a much longer quote, but it's painted on the outside of a boxing gym in Iowa.
Oh.
I happened to get that photo, and it's so cool that it's an opinion. Somebody says you can't do something. That's an opinion. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but it's not a fact. And so you have to think about that. So mindset is so important, particularly in sales and athletes. We're right around the Olympic time now, Olympics, and the mindset is just will lead you so far if you can work.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think about that a lot. Obviously, doing mindset work and thought work, the mindset of an athlete. But I'm silly. I'll watch reality shows and be like, the thought that's getting her down this path, right? There's a thought that's going on. I was just thinking, I'll just do like a TikTok of the work with reality shows.
Yeah, that's funny. Let people know how they can reach you if they do want to talk more about mindset or just being stronger, showing up in a stronger way.
Yeah, the easiest way is to just go to my website at unboundandunbothered.com.
Unbound, and is it AND or
Yeah.
com?
Yes. And that has the information. You can set up, if you want to talk to me, you can set up an appointment.
Or on
And what happens on
LinkedIn?
those is just like we talk, right? You don't have to come prepared. We chat. I'll let you know if I can help. And I'll always give tips on how you can start feeling better right away, even if we decide not to work together. So
Well, that's great. I love that. Or they could probably reach out on LinkedIn.
yes. Yes.
Okay.
LinkedIn. I'm a little bit slower, but I definitely will get to it. So if I'm not back to
Website's
you in 24
quicker.
hours, it's just because it's a messy place for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got that. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Gretchen, is wonderful to have you here today. And I think there's hope for the future. And some of the things we talked about, I hope people put into place. And if you do any of these tips that we talked about, please let us know because we love
Yes.
to hear about
Yeah.
that kind of thing. If I could hear more people apologizing less, patting themselves on the back more,
Yeah.
and really working to be their very best self and to go as high as they want to go in an organization or to build their own, that's a good day for me. So,
Yeah. Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation.
oh, it's my pleasure. All right. Thank you.